Hey, good afternoon. Welcome. It's the Team Super Dad podcast, and today I'm talking to Dean Coulson,
Hey
a
guys, how you
lean warrior. Hello, Dean.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, we're
Thanks for
very good.
having me
Oh, it's my pleasure. Dean is known as the Lean Warrior. He's a nutritionist, martial arts expert of actually a very long time,
on.
performance coach, and a whole bunch of other stuff, which is exactly why I've got you on. Dean and I got connected through Coffee with Dan, actually.
Yes, yeah,
His group just keeps on growing from strength to strength. I
yeah.
don't want to say too much about it because everyone's going to go over
Well,
there.
enough of
But yeah, but that's not the spirit of things. Dan, I forgot his second name now.
that.
Dan Meredith. Yeah, top bloke, top bloke.
Yes.
So Dean, why don't you introduce yourself? I'm sure you can do yourself better justice. We've got your accent is Newcastle up north in England, so we'll
True, yeah.
I'll challenge our foreign friends listening in. But yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, okay. So originally, a long time ago, I had an IT consultancy. I worked for myself, and then from there, realized I was, here for more than that. And so I had a couple of, let's say, experiences along the way, which really just changed the whole course of my life. First, when I was in my teens with my mum who was ill, and I couldn't help her, so I got frustrated with that. I also got frustrated the fact that she wasn't there around for me because she wasn't very well. And then that kind of sort of steered me towards looking after myself and training, not so much the health and nutrition side back then.
Yeah, you got to remember, you're just a good northern lad at heart.
What you like?
What did an average after school tea look like when you were a kid?
I remember eating a lot of bachelor savory rice and, cheese savory baked potatoes. I remember that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So,
uh,
sorry, carry on. Yeah, you were.
yeah. So, and after that, obviously, you just get on with life. And then I got married, and then we tried for kids for 5 years. And this is the real thing: is the fact that we were told we couldn't have kids naturally after the 5 years, and we tried. There wasn't always there's no great hurry; it'll happen when it happens. But the more it didn't happen, the more you start wondering about it. And we went to see the doctors. We got the tests. Problem was mine. Everything that was wrong with sperm was wrong. And there's three things: there's motility, mobility, and volume. Well, there was about three of them instead of like 5 million. None of them could swim, and they were all hunchbacks. So it was like literally
So
nothing.
the worst sperm party ever. Just
Yeah, exactly. And so that really, really hit me hard because obviously you take that on board as your own fault. So I went about thinking, okay,
how old are you at this point? How old when you got married and all this happening?
I was 1998. So what was that? 27, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, 27. So, and we've been kind of trying before that because we've been going on for a while. It wasn't until 2004 when Sam was actually born naturally. And the only reason he was born naturally is because I didn't accept the medics' reason. I didn't accept that we couldn't have kids naturally. Yes, we could have went down other routes, but I really believed that we could have kids. And so I started looking at different things, and I started looking at nutrition and what nutrition really was. So we booked an appointment with a nutritionist, but back in the day there was no social media. It was yellow pages and thumbing through. No one knew what nutritionists were, but we found one anyway, and she blew our minds. The stuff that she revealed was just crazy, and it all fit because for the longest time, I mean, I was like 11, 12. I always had a blocked nose. I always carried handkerchiefs with me. It turns out I was lactose intolerant. Nowadays, that's just a common occurrence. Everyone knows about lactose intolerance, but back then it wasn't a thing. I had 2 nose operations through the doctors because obviously they don't deal with nutrition in any way. It's just symptomatic stuff. And then she blew our minds about that. In fact, all different things. We actually came home that night and we looked in my cupboards and everything we thought was healthy, the normal government stuff like skim milk, brown bread, that kind of stuff. It was just all crap. We looked in the cupboards and we didn't have anything to eat that night. We had nothing to eat, and we're that shell shocked by the revelation and the truth of it that we didn't eat, and that was the start of it. And that was when I started looking at sort of studying. I bought so many books. I contacted the authors of books. I did courses and they got to internships. That was a bit later on, but I realized that there was something that could be done. So I found a fertility nutritionist, got in touch with her through our book. We worked with her, and 3 months later, Joy was pregnant. And that's no fluke, no fluke. Because the maturation of sperm is 3 months. And we've done a lot of work up to that point. We really cleaned everything up. We stopped drinking. We did everything that was possible and asked of us. Supplementation, all that kind of thing. And Joy was pregnant 3 months later. And it was just a chance thing. It was, when you get to a fact when it almost becomes regimented that you have sex to try and have kids at the right month and all that kind of stuff. It was a quickie in the morning before work, and we nearly didn't have time because we were late. That's what happened. And that moment, we both remember it.
Yeah. Well, I know categorically the occasions where my kids were conceived as well. I think it might sound weird to some people, and I guess if you only have sex occasionally or it was a one-night stand, then it is easy to pinpoint that. But I agree. I know the exact times both my children were conceived.
Yeah. And so it was such an amazing time, and something that should have been an amazing time, but wasn't, because unbeknown to us, there was some kind of, let's say, Joy was just ill from the moment she got pregnant. From when she found out that she was ill, and we just thought it was morning sickness because she was really nauseous and she just felt sick all the time.
Yeah. Well, listen, hang on 1 second, Dean. Let's jump into the finer details of it all in a moment. But that's a brilliant intro into how you sort of started this nutrition journey.
Yeah.
But just for the listeners, right now you're the Lean Warrior, and what does that mean? What do you do right now?
So Lean Warrior is a coaching program, coach men. So I coach successful businessmen, entrepreneurs, CEOs who are stressed, they're anxious, feel burned out, just to optimize their health and performance. Because I think so many guys, especially people who've got that drive for financial success, they kind of get there and then they realize it's kind of a hollow victory because they've neglected their health, they've neglected their relationships with themselves and other people close to them. And then they hide behind this bravado because guys just don't like talking. They like to bury it. It's almost like a sign of weakness. And so I work with guys to bring that out, help release internal self-limited emotions, which are the deep-rooted beliefs that stop us from doing the other things, from optimizing our health, from cleaning up our nutrition, from moving better, being able to express ourselves. And so that's the kind of stuff I do. So that helps these guys start to relax more, to feel happy, feel more fulfilled, and just spend more time with their family. So I think they just get that business. There's a lot of guys I work with have big disconnects with that. It's just help kind of reintegrating, I suppose, through like the health paradigm that I use.
Yeah. Well, and that's how I came to reach out to you, is that so much of what you say about yourself on your website and stuff is aligned with the Team Super Dad and everything we're setting out to do for busy business owning dads and dads with second incomes, people who want to actually grow and expand in life, create their best life ever.
Yeah.
But they're coming up against this kind of glass buffer. They can't quite realize why they're not getting through it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And again, because your story blew me away about you and your wife. And we kind of just dive straight into it. But it's really interesting for dads, who've been through this experience of trying to get pregnant. And there may even be some men on here. In fact, I hope there are some men who are listening to our podcast, and perhaps they might be struggling with getting pregnant. But you went through IVF and everything, didn't you?
Yeah, I went through IVF twice. So when we were told that we couldn't have kids, obviously that was the route because we didn't know any difference. That was the medical route. We're fortunate to be able to get that twice, but both times it didn't work. And each time, the first time was devastating because that was another sort of smack in the face type of thing. And then we sort of regrouped and we tried again, and it didn't work again. And it was harrowing. Then it was like it's easy to talk about now, but obviously when you get in that bubble, you really feel it. We really struggled. At one point, I didn't know whether we'd get through it because you get consumed by this, and I was consumed by guilt as well because it was my issue. But it was almost like I'm not accepting this. There's got to be a way, and that's part of who I am. Really, is the fact I believe there's always a way to figure something out, to get something to work. It might not be, medics. It could be some other health practitioner. It might not even be to do with health, but I always believe there's a way to find your path, and that's how we found ours. So that's
through the yellow pages. Where did you start in the yellow pages? I mean, like, I guess nowadays you just dabble around, don't you? A bit of a Google this, Google that. But like, did you just go to N for nutrition? Did you go to...
don't even know. It must have been the yellow. I remember putting the yellow pages up, and 20 miles from here, and to the house, and we're there for hours. And she was very knowledgeable, and as I said, it was just such an eye opener. It's like I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like blood, just talking about blood type and all kinds of different things. She said I should be eating wheat. We shouldn't even really eat wheat. We should maybe eat it once a week. I was eating like 3-4 times a day because that's what you did back then. Cereal or toast or pasta or sandwiches. So I'm back and thinking, how am I going to live? It was like that blow your mind. What the hell am I going to eat type of thing.
Yeah. Well, since we spoke last week, I've put myself on an unofficial challenge to not buy bread products. Now, I still eat muesli each day, which has got some oats and a bit of, I think there's bits of like bran flakes in the muesli, whatever. But I've not bought any bread products, and I'm going to try and see if I can go 30 days. I'm going to France, which is clearly going to cause a problem with croissants and things. But just to see, like, okay, right, in the supermarket, I'm not going to buy bread products. And those kind of challenges are dead easy for any dad to just take on, isn't it? Like, whatever doesn't have to be some big diet overhaul. That you can literally say, I'm not going to drink beer for a week, or I'm not going to. What do you do? Anything that sort of thing? Can you recommend anything like that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've got a whole, I've got a foundation, a health program that I look at, and for me, it's based on 7 principles. So it's like having, it's got portion control in there. So we're always looking at portion control, having like mindful eating. So we're not just eating on the go. So that's when we eat too much, and we're not being mindful of what we eat. And if we can create food as an experience and slow down, then we know we're full and we don't overeat, for example. Then, it's protein with every meal, veggies with every meal, which sounds, people are so hardcore cereal and the thought of having like veggies in the morning. But, bacon and eggs, it's still a cooked breakfast. We can start shifting people along the way. What else? Some fats with every meal, unless you've been training, in which case then supplement with some carbohydrates. And then we've got rest and recovery, and we've got, water, hydration. And those are the principles, but then we get, when I work with people, it's all about, okay, where are you at right now? It's always a coaching approach. I want to know where you're at. I don't want you to be able to, I don't want to say, right, you've got to do this right now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
That'll trigger people. That'll stress people out because it's too much.
No, exactly. Like in an extreme, go vegan next week. And you're going to freak the living daylights out of someone there. Much better to say, do you know your breakfast is a bit weird? How about trying this? Or here's a good one. Because I do love a McDonald's sausage and egg McMuffin, okay? Guilty pleasure. But don't get the hash brown, get the bag of carrots.
Yeah, it's just the little steps. I call it degrees of slippage, and you can do it works both ways. Degrees of slippage could go from salmon and rice to a cheeseburger if you just take one thing out every time, but you can also reverse that. So you can go from cheeseburger, then you can just a hamburger, then you have it with without the bun, and then
without the bun, exactly, out the bun.
And then that kind of stuff. Then you can sort of step by step. It just becomes the new normal, and then the new normal, and then over time, all of a sudden, you're just in this different place and you're eating different things. It doesn't have to be an immediate thing. It's just where you're currently at and where you are comfortable with. I always say, take the next step that feels comfortable, that feels good. Because if it doesn't feel good, it's too much of a stretch.
Yeah. And how much does food affect people's mood? Quite often you hear people talk about, I get stressed and I just eat that because I like it. Or even myself, I know like a bit of chocolate, a bit of dark chocolate more than white. But how much of a mind trick is that? And what's the effect of the wrong food on our stress levels?
Well, the wrong food, the first thing we can do when we ingest is it goes in our stomach. And gut health is massively important. Because the gut's known as the second brain, it's connected directly to the brain by the vagus nerve. So it's when we're born in the embryonic stage, they're together in the break, but they don't detach. And so, we've got the same amount of neurotransmitters in the stomach as we have in the brain. Sorry
to cut in. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I've read that before about it being the second brain. and how close our gut is to our central nervous system. And I'm sure you're going to talk in a second about leaky gut, but I'd never heard it explained that it literally is our second brain, because when we first became an embryo, those two things are connected. That's amazing.
Yeah, when they divide, they still stay connected, and they're very similar. We've got the autonomic nervous system, which is the brain controlled, and then we've got the enteric nervous system, which is controlled by the stomach. It could actually run by itself. It doesn't need the brain necessarily. It doesn't rely on the brain. That's probably the easiest.
I think I've seen some people like that on the beach last week, for sure.
Exactly. And so whatever you eat, if your gut is not happy and healthy, your brain isn't, because it's a direct link. If you're putting stuff in that your body doesn't like, your brain's not going to like it. It's not an automatic thing. And so it's really important. That's the first line. Get your gut right, get everything working right. And that, of course, relies on putting better food in there, food that's nourishing, as opposed to, I always say sometimes you can be overfed but starving to death, because if you're putting food which has got devoid of nutrients in it, like if you live on junk food all the time, there's very little nutrition in there. So we're eating energy-dense foods, which of course expands our waistlines, but it doesn't help our body look after itself, which is then leads to other things like diseases from obesity, diabetes, lots of different things, metabolic syndrome. There's loads of different things, and we can absolutely control that. But as you said before, it's not even a mindset thing, because we fire and wire things. And what I mean by that is, if we have an emotional event, it's usually when we're younger. We usually fire and wire when we're very young. If you think when we're a baby, we do three things: we cry, we sleep. Four things: cry,
we shit everywhere.
When we're crying, it's for one of those other three.
Yeah.
Since the babies can't speak, we'll check the nappy. If they've had a nap, they'll stick a bottle in. Yeah, but it could be something else, but that's what we do. And so, like, milk's sweet, and so we kind of get that early association with, I feel safe, I'll calm down, and there's something sweet in my mouth.
Yeah.
And as humans, as we get older, if we feed that, and I see a lot of parents where they keep their kids quiet, they give them sweets and all that kind of stuff. And so we've got that fire and wire association of, there's an emotional event, what made me feel better, or I had sweet things. And so that can carry in adulthood, men or women. And that's often the case. So anytime we have a stressful time, whether it's at work or, with our partners or whatever it is, our brain gets switched. The front part of the brain, the thinking part of the brain, the logical brain, the neocortex gets switched off. We end up in the other two parts of the brain, either fight or flight response, which we all know about, the reptilian brain to keep us alive. Also got the middle part of the brain, which is the limbic system, which is your emotional center. And so anytime we're stressed, the thinking part gets switched off immediately. So even if you're being good and having on a diet and eating good food, and you haven't dealt with the deeper issues, so you get stressed, your brain says, what did you do the last time? And it reacts. It doesn't get you to think. In the last, whatever you've wired to that, last time I was stressed like this, I drank a bottle of wine, I had some Ben and Jerry's, I ate a box of Jaffa cakes, whatever it is.
So that association is formed, that unhealthy association is formed, and we don't even realize we had control over it in the first place.
Well, yeah, it's definitely, the foundations are there. We then expand on it. We all have milk, I have as well, but I don't have those kind of connections with food, but I know a lot of people do. And so it's just whatever else has happened during that, the person's lifetime, then we get wired in different things. And we can absolutely change that, because we put it there in the first place, unbeknown to us. But once we understand how the brain works and how triggers work, then we can look at what the real reasons as to why we're doing and reaching for those things. Because once we reach for them and we eat them, our brain calms down, feels safe again, you get access to that front part of the brain. And your brain says, what the hell have I just eaten that? Oh, I'm on a diet. I was watching what I was eating, and then the guilt starts. And then you get that vicious circle.
Yeah, sod it. Oh, well, what's another day? What's another day? Then you realize a month has gone. Yeah.
Whatever it is. And then, of course, then we get this yo-yo diet where we might use willpower for a week, 2 weeks, 30 days, and you'll endure something. This is why willpower, short-term willpower is great. It gets you over a hurdle. But if we try and use it for long-term things, we're just trying to endure something for a period of time that we don't like.
Yeah.
And that's not a great long-term strategy.
No, and so people need what they need. An empowering context is part of it. Yes, they need some willpower, and then they need the practical steps to change their habit.
Yes, exactly. And understanding what that is, because sometimes we can mechanically change habits, but it's at the emotional level. There's always an emotional, humans can change habits immediately. You don't have to wait the 30 days or the 60 days. We're going to change them immediately if there's an emotional attachment to it. For example, I'll use this, if we got kids in primary school, and this is hard hitting, which is why I use this. We've got kids in primary school, let's say, and, happy, we're happy. And then you hear the next day that the teacher's on the sex offenders register. You won't wait 30 days to take them out of school. There's an emotional, firing there. So hold on, unsafe. My kid's not going back there. And it's that type of thing where we can immediately change, and you would never take them back there because it's an event that's been changed emotionally and emotionally.
Yeah.
You do it mechanically, like, drink more water every day, or, cut out bread. And that can absolutely become a new habit. But if you use bread to appease yourself emotionally on some stressful event, whether it is whatever it is, then that can easily just go back to there because it's tied emotionally. And it's the emotions that we get to look at, the emotions that drive a lot of behaviors. You mentioned before about what you put in your mouth. Absolutely, what you put in your mouth can create different behaviors, because what we ingest creates hormones, which change behaviors, which change habits. And so we can, there's this huge link that we shouldn't have to be aware of it, but in the modern world, the way things are in marketing, everyone's trying to get you to buy the next quick fix and the fads and all that kind of stuff. We'll get caught up in it. It's so easy.
Yeah. But when they've got teams of scientists working out how to make us do things, we should at least have one scientist aware of how to not do things, i.e. ourselves.
Well, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's when you start. This is, the other part of the lean warrior is, literally means, find your essence. It's all about stripping away all the things that are not necessary, the non-essentials. So that could be thoughts, it could be people, it could be material objects, it could be lots of things to get to what your truth is. Because everyone knows who we are deep down, but if we feel unsafe in any way emotionally, then we'll put a story around it. We'll put like armor up there. We'll put
like bubble wrap. We just keep putting bubble wrap, and protect ourselves.
Of course, it's the metaphor.
Literally bubble wrap. Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. It could be other things. And it's one of those things that this is why I work on an emotional level, because if I can help people process the emotions, because if they're very painful, we'll go straight in that stressed place, so we'll not even get a chance to think about it.
Yeah. Well, this kind of dovetails into a little bit to what was going on with your wife after the baby, and this became a bit of a breakthrough for you, didn't it? Around the understanding of how this part of about how we work, about this part of the mind.
Yeah, because she didn't have morning sickness. She had acute anxiety, and there was a deep-rooted story playing from when she was younger. So consciously she wanted babies, unconsciously it felt unsafe because of an event that happened with her and her mom, and I'm not going into the details, but that got stuck on the hard drive, just sitting there until the unique event of really getting pregnant, fired it up. And so it wasn't until she tried the strongest anti-nausea drugs that you can even use, and didn't even touch the side. That's when we knew it wasn't morning sickness. That and
no, it's funny, isn't it? You kind of got to laugh because it's just that's just modern medicine, isn't it? We're just going to dig until and like, no, that wasn't what was wrong. There was something else causing this problem. The dam up the road was stopping the water. We didn't need to dig for the water.
Exactly. And so this was this supposed to be an exciting time, was horrific. It was awful.
No, I think that's important for dads to hear. I and my ex, at the time wife, obviously, first pregnancy was amazing, just like this beautiful experience. And the second one was the pregnancy from hell, off the back of 3 miscarriages, which kind of putting words in her mouth, but my interpretation of it, incredibly anxious about the miscarrying, the fourth one miscarrying. And then the pregnancy was very, very difficult. Yeah. And that's no slight on any woman that's going through that. But it is interesting for anyone in that situation to consider maybe there's something emotional going on, something more deep rooted, and that you could find some freedom in that area.
Well, exactly. And I think guys, we are there to help our wives, especially if they're pregnant, and we'll look after them the best way we can. But then nobody's really looking after the guys. We kind of park that and we bury it.
Yeah.
And of course, then once we have stopped being the person who's helping, that's still there. It's unresolved, and yet we'll just let it sit there because we don't know. But then that manifests into other things. That could be adding to stress, emotional problems that down the road could start then leaking out as other things, rows, shouting, just rage. We've got a lot of these things because all emotions is just like energy. Everything's energy and it's meant to flow. But if we put a block on that, whatever that emotional event was, whether it was when you were young, whether it was later in life, we don't allow that out. We don't allow it to express, then it comes out in other ways. And that could be physical pain, that could be illness, disease, all manner of things. So your body is trying to express itself, it's trying to tell you to express, but we repress it, we suppress it.
Yeah. Well, the classic ones for dads, aren't they? I've just got to get my head down, get us through this, get us through this at work, get us through this at home. Backache, well, of course I've got backache, I'm old. Migraine, well, I might be tired, I'm probably a bit stressed. They kind of understand it, but it's
the signals are there.
Yeah, but I know I just kept thinking, if I just keep pushing through, we'll be all right. Failing to realize that I was draining my tank. There was literally nothing left, but the engine was still being run at 100 miles an hour. And that's ultimately where the break came. I'll tell you what, on that point, when I was feeling really, really bad, right, I was doing searches for what is burnout? Like, am I burnt out?
Yeah.
What was it that obvious that I should have just been realized and nodded at myself and gone, yes, I am burnt out? Or is there a kind of a telltale checklist for busy executive dads or any dads really to recognize they're pretty much burnt out?
I think they know, because what they do is they always tend to numb and sedate. There's always something that's pressing. They know in themselves that there's something amiss, but instead of dealing with it, they'll distract themselves in some way. They'll drink, maybe take drugs, like gamble, might look porn. The thing is that they do. They'll kind of do it because at the end of the day, it's one of those things where, again, if we feel emotionally unsafe, so we immediately go and play a story. For example, if we got some story playing, we always think, we think and then we feel. But that cannot be possible. And there might be because usually we get triggered at an emotional level. And as soon as we get triggered, the thinking part gets switched off. There cannot be thoughts. All it can be is stories that the brain uses to take us away from that pain. So my son, for example, when he was 3, he was the next door neighbour's Labrador came over to see him, lovely soft dog, came to lick him, knocked him on his arse. So my son at 3-year-old saw was this big monster with a big dog coming, and so ever since then, he's fired and wired that dogs are dangerous. And he's 15, he's now 16, he's shit scared of dogs still. But now what's happening is, whereas before he wouldn't go to the beach because he knew dogs were off the lead. He wouldn't go beside the river because there's dogs off the lead. And
so did he know that he knew that was why he didn't like the beach, or he just decided he didn't like the beach?
No, well, when he was younger, yes, because there was dogs there. But now he just doesn't go to the beach. Because what happens is, over time, if he doesn't resolve that, but I can't make him resolve it either. That's the key.
Yeah.
All I do is remind him that when he's ready, we'll sort that out. But if he doesn't, all he'll do is he'll layer a story on a story, and when he's older, maybe he's got kids himself, and the kids want to go to the beach. I don't like the beach, and he'll forget why, because he doesn't need to know. Because at an emotional level, the brain's saying that's the story to play, so we're not danger. And it doesn't matter if it was when he was 3 and he's 30. The story's still there because it was blocked at that point, and that's where the energy's blocked, and that's when it needs to be released. Because when you release that energy, and there's some techniques that I use to do that, to be able to help face these things and let them go. Once you let them go, the story goes, because that story was there to protect you. But if the reason that you were being protected is no longer there, then it's not needed. So your brain kind of processes, rejigs itself. Yeah,
like reprogramming the computer, basically, like just putting some new instructions in there.
Exactly.
Do you know, like a lot of dads would think about this as that they might know something like this is going on, but they might think of it as counselling.
Yes.
And they're like, I don't want a counsellor. I'm a successful business person. I don't want a counsellor. I'm a tough guy. I don't want it. Like, in some ways, the distinction between coach and counsellor is really easy, because you say, I'm working with you to take you somewhere, as opposed to I'm working through something to help you, to help you move forward. But in other ways, and it don't matter whether you call it a coach or a counsellor. We're like, we're dealing with stuff head on, and we're moving you forward. If someone's concerned about working through with these things, how would you reassure them or address that?
Well, the reassurance is really that we don't do anything that we want to do. We don't
Right.
even, to be honest, we don't even really need to keep revisiting things. I know counsellors, certainly experienced counsellors I know, will keep revisiting the same thing, but your brain doesn't really know the difference between reality and memories. And so if you're revisiting something that's painful, it's going through it as if you are there over and over and over.
Yeah.
For me, the stuff that I do, for coaching, for example, from a neuroscience perspective, we're just
yeah, that's what we're talking about, neuroscience, really, isn't it?
So neuroscience and emotional healing, very slightly different, but I just use them as tools as to what is the best tool to use. So neuroscience, we're just asking better questions. We're allowing them, to answer their own questions. So for me, it's ask better questions for them. Then I'm getting them to find their own answers to their questions. It's not for me to tell them, because that's not coaching, that's mentoring.
Yeah.
Coaching for me is asking questions specifically to bring out what they're struggling with. And that can be tough. And sometimes that's when I use the emotional stuff, because sometimes we don't even need to talk about stuff. There's a trigger there. We look at where the trigger is, we allow it. I'll take somebody through a procedure or process where I can allow them to let that energy go. I've had this experience myself. When I was 2, 3, I had my tonsils out. I was taking in the hospital, and the memories, I've still got vivid memories, visual images of that happening. I know the story. My mom didn't want to leave me. She was crying. They wouldn't let her stay. The day that she came, obviously it was a phone box. There's no mobile phones back then. She actually ran from the car park, the payphone nearest the car park in the hospital, when could she pick me up? She wanted to come get me. But meanwhile, 3-year-old Dean in the cot, like bars.
The bars,
in pain, and his mom's leaving. He's been abandoned by the person who loves the most.
Yeah.
That sticks. And even though consciously I knew the story, and unconsciously there was energy blocks. And I was just talking to a coach. It wasn't I coach specifically, just like a peer
conversation.
And we're just having a conversation about stuff, and he was just talking about something specific. And so I actually shared with him these vivid images, and I described them. And as I did that, I just burst into tears from nowhere, because it was release, and I just sobbed for 10 minutes uncontrollably in front of him. It was on Zoom. I was like just blubbering for 10 minutes. And then I just felt this energy just leave me, just came up and up and up and just gone. And I know it's gone because I can talk about it now, like with you, for example. Like I describe those images, and there'll be no feeling there. There'll be no energy, because it's gone. But for 40 odd years, it was there. Even though I knew the story, little Dean was still in there. Like that energy was stuck at that level. And once I found that out, I started looking at how I was proving. We always go out of our way to prove our beliefs true, and they're unconscious beliefs, so we're not aware of them. So consciously, you might say you want to lose weight. Unconsciously, last time you did that, something happened, and it was painful. So we go out of our way to prove that true, and it was the same with me. So I was pushing people away, not intentionally, because I'm thinking, well, they're going to abandon me anyway. So I would do things to prove that.
And this is the really important part about what you're sharing, is that what's going on in people's relationships won't necessarily be what's going on in their relationship. And so they've fallen in love, they've got married, everything seemed absolutely rosy, and now there's some struggle going on, and you're thinking, why don't you love me anymore? Why is our marriage going wrong? And actually all that's happening, but possibly what's happening is something from before, something from your past, something completely unrelated is bubbling up and now stinking the place out. I think speaking for myself, I think that would have been very powerful to have realized that in my own marriage. I think a lot of people will either, particularly people who are still in a marriage but unhappy, they're like, we're never going to fix this. Actually, a bit like you getting pregnant, by addressing the problem in the right way, a whole new beginning was created.
Because when couples argue, and we all do, I mean, to be fair, I've been arguing with my wife for a while because we've done a lot of work with emotional healing and energy work and all that kind of stuff, just to realize who we are and what was triggering us about us. And when I remember for years, I remember having arguments and I'm thinking, why is she, flying off the handle? It was just, just an innocent remark, or and it was because the thing is never the thing. It's just a trigger to something that's much bigger. And if we haven't got awareness of it, we'll just keep doing it. And we did. But if you then start realizing what these emotions are, if you work with somebody who can then, explain what you're feeling and how to let it go, and and it's safe and it feels okay, because it's a very fearful thing. Fear just being a word where we don't want to address something because it feels unsafe. Then we can absolutely do it. And there's just a side note. Now we're talking about relationships. There's a great book by, I can't remember his name.
You tell me what it is. I'll look it up while you're talking.
It's the 5 Love Languages.
Oh yeah, 5 Love Languages. I would have definitely have said that. Yeah.
So that now, which is a really good way of understanding, your other half, or like even your kids or whatever it is, understand what their love language is. Because sometimes you think you're outpouring your love to somebody because that's your love language, because that's what you love, but the other person just doesn't get it, so they don't feel loved because you're
totally. Gary Chapman is the author, and it's been this has come up in a number of podcasts, and I totally advocate. In fact, it's part of the Hero Academy book list, because it's unbelievable. Just to run through them, the 5 languages are words of affirmation, physical touch, receiving gifts, quality time, and acts of service. And for me, I'm definitely physical touch, and I'm words of affirmation as well.
And it's exactly the same.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So I want to be hugged, and told I'm great, and I want to be hugged and told everything's going to be fine, and I'm like, okay, got that, and I'm off. I'm like, I'm ready. And
my wife is fine together, and so it's different. So as long as my wife has quality time, she's fine as well.
Yeah.
It's just if we don't know that and we're pulled apart, then Christ.
Well, totally. My ex, she was very much acts of service. So she would cook dinner. Yeah. I would cook dinner as well. It was a shared sort of responsibility. But when she cooked it, she wanted flipping trumpets and flipping, party poppers and everything. And I was just like, oh yeah, cheers. Not because I didn't appreciate it, and I would always say thank you, because that's how we've been brought up. But it wasn't enough for her. And amazing, for any couple, and even for your children, like you mentioned, if you can get, blimey, what that love language is between you and your daughter, you and your son, you and your wife, and then know that as a family, so that no one's love language gets left out. And if people imagine it like a bucket, everyone's bucket's full up, we've all got full up buckets, and we're happy. If someone's bucket has been completely drained, and it's obviously it can be mum or dad. The kid could be flipping depressed and upstairs. It's generally they're just not getting what they need.
I agree with that. And married with the stuff that I do with the emotional stuff and the neuroscience stuff, it's very, very powerful. Even if people, if guys are having relationship issues, that's the first place to go to, because sometimes just by understanding that and changing the behaviour because of that, then that could be enough. But usually it's deep rooted.
Yeah.
So but it's very powerful.
Totally. Well, listen, let's change tacks a little bit, or change gears, as our American friends say. What about the martial arts? And I know a bit about it, so I'm kind of prompting the questions. But you're a bit of a badass martial arts person, yeah. Well, you've been doing it long enough. You should be. If you're not, then I need a word with your sensei or whatever. Exactly. But just tell us a little bit about how you why it's so important to you, and well, never good to give someone 3 questions, but why it's so important, where it started, and what you get out of it as part of your practice day to day.
It started when I was 15. Bruce Lee, obviously, the man. Seen some of his movies, thought really liked the idea of this, and so I found a club which was really good. And so I'd actually dabbled with judo first a few years earlier, but I wanted a punch and kick, and I didn't know judo wasn't punch and kick. I lasted 3 weeks, and I myself in the bathroom. I wouldn't come out. My dad said, "If you come out now, I'm gonna take you back." And he was true to his word. He didn't. So it turns out that would have been a good thing to learn, but there we go. And so I learned. It was called Jindiando at the time, which it was a combination of Taekwondo and Taekwondo, which were more mainstream.
Right.
And I got my first black belt when I was 17. But even when I got my black belt when I was 17, I still felt a lot of fear.
And what does black belt mean? I mean, people hear about black belt all the time, don't they? But is it really hard? Is it not so hard? Does it make you a super guy, or like what is a black belt? What is a black belt even?
A black belt here's the thing. It depends on the person and the persona of the person. Sometimes people are just like fights anyway. So if they came in, it wouldn't be different. But for me, when I did it back then, it's learning skills to a proficient level, and that's what a first dan. First dan's the first black belt you get, and it goes up in dans after that. So when you get your black belt, you just demonstrate that you're proficient in the techniques that you've learned over a period of time. And obviously, there's 10 gradings to black. You start at white, and 10 gradings later. Black belt. And yes, you can fail them if you're not good enough, if you don't perform the techniques correctly, if you don't or sparring. When I was first learning, we broke boards, so breaker boards, break boards, and the grades. So really, it's just a proficiency. After that, for me, that's when you start learning, when you get your first dan, because that means you're proficient. That means then you start learning more. However, some people don't get there, or some people think that's the be all and end all. What I discovered was the time, not long after I got that, I was having a issue with a guy, a bit of a bully. And one Friday night, I'd just be in the local shops with my girlfriend and our wife. And he just appeared out of nowhere, and I was just getting in the car, and he was just yelling, he was, swearing at me. And
well, he's a big Geordie. Give us some Geordie swear words. Come on.
Yeah, he was a all of those.
Just with an accent. Okay, I got it. Yeah.
And I shit myself. I
would be. I
locked the door, and then he left, and then I went home, just around the corner, and then I was so angry with myself. I told my dad was in the house. I was angry. I felt shame because my girlfriend was there, and I and all that kind of thing, and I just didn't like it at all. And then the next few weeks, I couldn't live with it. And I thought, I'm gonna have to confront this guy. So I actually went looking for him, like around the streets, and I could never find him. And then I found out where he lived, which wasn't that far from me. So I went to challenge him. I actually went to his door. I said, "Right, let's have it out." And I was still shitting myself, but I knew I was not doing it. And again, he was all full of mouth. And then he got his big old English sheepdog out, which I knew was a bit micey. He had the dog away. Let's go. And he was telling us he was going to take us to the beach and rip my arms off and all that kind of stuff. I said, "Well, let's go." He didn't. He was just all that, and then he just shrunk away into the house, and I never saw him again. But that told me then that you can have a black belt, but if you learn, it's not the pavement arena, as I discovered later on. The pavement arena is out, street fights. That's out when it's real. When you're in a dojo, it's a controlled environment. Yeah. And I get some people can make it work from there. I get that. I know some people can, but the majority of people can't because they're not taught how to deal with fear. And when fear is really, really, acute, we find ourselves rooted to the spot, literally frozen. And I've seen 5th dan black belts get their arse handed them on the street because they didn't that safe environment, being inside, and there was rules and regulations and how to do things, but outside there's none. And so I can't remember when it was. I think it was 2001. I started buying books from a guy called Jeff Thompson because I wanted to understand this. I'd left it for a while, but I still felt fear with it. And I found a guy called Jeff Thompson based in Coventry. And it was like he had created something called the Real Combat System. And he'd done things like Animal Days where the pressure tested the martial arts. And I actually took it as real as it could do. So, they would go down to, hitting people, going to the ground and choking them out in this environment. just to try and to trigger the adrenal response.
Yeah.
To handle it. So I sought him out, and then 2010 I actually started going. He was running what you call a master class. It was 6 months, one afternoon a month for 6 months. But like to get like a self-protection certificate, and I knew how good he was, and it was all. He's wrote so many books about fear. He's wrote 40 odd books. He's after winning author and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't teach martial arts now.
What was his program thing called?
The Real Combat System. That's his.
The Real Combat System. Jeff Thompson, The Real Combat System.
Yeah. You'll get a couple of instructors who are based in Coventry who are still teaching it, but Jeff doesn't teach it now.
How long did you see him for?
Sorry, see again?
How long did you like go and see him for?
It ended up 5 years. I travelled
5 years to Coventry. Tell people how far Coventry is from Newcastle.
500-mile round trip.
You seriously wanted to see this guy, okay? For 5 years. 5 years.
Because when I went to see him, it wasn't just about the fear and the martial arts and the physical side. That's how he taught it. But he was very much into like the metaphysical side, the mental side, like getting past fear, understanding what fear was, stop allowing fear to block you from having the life that you wanted. So it wasn't just about the martial arts. It was just that was just a catalyst for something massive. And it was around that time when I realized that my job, like being an IT consultant, I just didn't like it anymore. It wasn't why I was here. And so I had a book called Shapeshifter, which I read around that time before I started work with him. And I opened a gym. I became a personal trainer and a coach. In like 2010, around this time, I started working with Jeff. And then when after a year of going down there, he invited me onto his black belt course, which is it's invite only. He didn't invite many people on there. So like first down, but again, he did a lot of physical stuff, and the grading was physical, was brutal. But it was all about the metaphysical stuff. It was about the deeper stuff. And what I learned was just self-protection starts with the self. So his is all about self-protection physically, but all those same rules, principles, I suppose you could say, work internally as well, because you've got an inner bully, the ego, the shadows, all them sub-personalities, all the stories that we choose to believe. You know, the things where you might eat too much food. That's a shadow. That's you become somebody else. You're not your true self. Then you're just it's just a sub part of you.
Yeah.
But
that could play out in making sales calls. It could play out in asking a woman out in a bar or going up to a woman in the street.
Yeah, all of that, fighting, anything and everything.
Fight. We go from dating to fighting.
Well,
sadly.
Yeah, could be the same. But, it could be anything you've got a deep-rooted fear of, and then you create a story as to why you can't. And that's the things that we did, like in the black belt course. So we used to sit for an hour just talking about things like deep roots of like really getting into fear, understanding fear, sitting with fear, and all that kind of things. And I mean, Jeff's, he's deeply spiritual. He's, as I said, wrote so many books, but he's read hundreds of books. And it's one of those things where at the end of the 12 months, yes, you do like a physical grading to see whether you've passed or not. But it was the journey. It was always about the journey. And then I still train with him, and then I was invited back, firstly to present on one of his courses. He created a course called the Self-Sovereignty course, which he created for directors, CEOs of companies, because there's
right
in London were like seeking them out. So he created something for them, and he asked me to present on that course for him with health and nutrition. And it was that's when I realized that these guys, are getting to this pinnacle, but they've still got shit going on. I worked with a guy as a result of that course. He came initially to help me to get in shape, but over time he got into shape, and then he was asked to do something which triggered him deep down, and all of a sudden his nutrition went to shit, his training went to shit. And so when we're going to call, I sort of dug deeper and found the real reason is that he felt that he was going to be humiliated by doing this thing he'd been invited on. So unconsciously, he started eating more, so he would be unfit to be overweight, so he couldn't possibly do that course. He wouldn't be ready for the course. And
sabotage the whole thing.
He did, and he didn't even understand that until we went, we dug deeper and found out the real reasons. And this is why coaching is so powerful. And this is why I created the Lean Warrior. As I said, Lean before was like find your essence, the warrior part. Warrior literally means have the courage to face yourself. And so it's you're facing your adversity, you're stripping everything away, facing the reasons why you are stuck, facing the reasons why you're not moving forward. That, as I say, could be anything. And of course, it's usually deeper rooted stuff that's just kind of disguise itself as something else, and so usually it's not a surface level thing. Most people, for example, they want to lose a bit of weight for it. That's that first trigger. They look at themselves in the mirror, but it's not. No one's unhappy they're overweight. They're overweight because they're unhappy. There's something that needs to be resolved. We talked about the bubble wrap earlier.
Yeah. These things are all linked. It's just the magic of this entire conversation.
Yeah.
Well, and having met you the other, a few weeks ago and talking this through today, so keen to get you involved in the Hero Academy and sharing this with the dads there as well, part of Team Super Dad. So that's going to be absolutely amazing. And in terms of so people could just martial arts is a great way to relieve stress, to get fit, and people and businessmen should always be conscious of their level of fitness, right? Or in fact, any dads should be conscious of their level of fitness.
Yeah, any dads, because it affects you. You'll make excuses why you can't play with kids. I haven't got time, but really it's because I'm unfit, and you're blowing out your arse. I get that. That I've worked with a lot of successful guys who have been in that position because they just push their health back. They think that they spend so much time creating money, and they get to that point and they've lost their health, and then they're spending all the money, in the health. And it's one of those things where martial arts, absolutely, it's a great stress reliever. For example, the real combat system that I still teach that. But when I do things like retreats, it's because having to have an altercation on the street is so scary. It's really frightening. It's
especially in the world today with flipping knives and nonsense. Yeah,
exactly. So I always as part of my coaching, from a physical self-defense, it's awareness, avoidance, escape. So being aware of your surroundings at all time. People who get mugged, for example, the people who are just what I call code white, just oblivious to their surroundings. They might be on their headphones, they might be looking at their phone, they might be just away with the fairies, whatever it is. And these are the easy targets. But I help people become hard targets from a physical perspective, from a self-protection, but also internally. The hard target, observe, be aware, avoid, things that, and avoidance isn't running away. It's being switched on enough to not allow yourself to get pulled into that. And
when I was at university, the student halls were on an estate, and I'd walked through there to the shop, to the bus shop, to the pub, many, many times. And then you'd get a notice come around saying, be careful, so-and-so, someone's been mugged. Yeah. And then no disrespect to whoever it was that got mugged, but it was like no surprise. You just go, I'm absolutely no surprise that it was him. And of course he didn't ask for it. And that's what he's saying. Why me? Why me? But the reality is, why you is because how you carry yourself. And that's why it's always you.
Yeah. Exactly right. So it always comes back to awareness. We always have that awareness of how we feel about ourselves. We always know what's true. We can't bullshit ourselves. We know when we say something, we know it's a lie. We won't feel it. We can disguise it. We can ignore it. We can distract ourselves from it. We know it's there, and it's about stripping that away and being so brutally honest with themselves. For me, it's like being honest, looking in the mirror and actually saying things to yourself. You can always see, because you always have some kind of inflection. You might have some kind of movement in your face. You might look down. It's well known. There's been research on where you look when you're talking. That means things. Whether it's shame, guilt, anger, whatever it is, deceit. There's so many things, but you can't do that to yourself. You really can't. You can try, but deep down, you always know.
Yeah. Yeah. Touching on NLP there for any of our NLP listeners. Brilliant. So, what I love about this conversation is that it's the different dimensions of our being that governs our success and our happiness, whether it's what we're putting in as food, whether it's what we're taking in through our eyes and ears, whether it's how we're reacting to that information or food that we've taken on board. And to be oblivious to any one of those elements means that we don't know what's going on or why it's going on. And
That's right.
and if we're experiencing challenges in our relationship, if we're experiencing challenges in our own sort of self-identity and self-worth, and if we're experiencing challenges in leading a team, running our business, then just going on the next business course or just taking her out for dinner isn't necessarily going to fix it. So if someone's committed to making improvements in any of these areas of life that both you and I focus on, then it's important they start to understand how the machine that they are works, and be willing enough to take on board, knowledge like you have, experiences like you have, because at our age, we're both a similar age. It's only now that we fully understand what it is to be alive.
Very true. Very, very true. And I think that's important. That's why the health paradigm I look at is health for me means we're not just looking at what we eat. That's the physical health perspective, but then we've got the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual. All four together like a jigsaw. They're synergistic. There's not either or. There's not one or the other. We can absolutely concentrate on all of them. We've got to be very honest with ourselves. It always comes back to truth. Haven't got time. Yes, you have. You've got 168 hours in a week. And if you start adding work in and sleep time, you've still got 70 hours. You've still got 70 hours to be able to do some training, to prepare some food, to give yourself some me time, to meditate. There's lots of reasons and excuses. Well, first we get to strip away the non-essentials, as I said before. We get to do that because there's so many things that we're doing that isn't even for us. They're just being put in there. We're doing it for somebody else. Somebody may suggest them, whether it's friends, family, wives, whatever it is. And then we just blindly do it without challenging it. And from a mental health perspective, for me, it's always about challenging the stories, challenging these thoughts, because we're not our thoughts. I think so many people just blindly accept the thought that comes in their head is that's true, that's what we do next. But no, they're just random, and they're coming through conditioning, they come through any kind of triggers that we have emotionally, they come from cultural norms, societal norms, how we were brought up, and that's all fine. We just get to have that awareness. We can't do anything until we're aware that something can change. Awareness is always the first thing. Then you take responsibility, because it's easy then to blame. But when we blame, we're disempowering ourselves because we're giving it over to somebody else. We can never fix it if we blame somebody else. We can only ever fix it when we accept responsibility that everything that we've done up to this point is our fault. Everything. And that's stings.
Oh, it does. Oh, it does. In my marriage, and I think anyone who's been divorced or having trouble in their marriage needs to realise that responsibility started most likely when you asked her out, or when you asked her to marry you. When I started to peel away all the blame, I was like, oh yeah, well I did ask her out. If you want to go back, there is ultimately a responsibility that we all have to take. Yeah,
that's very true. Very true.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, Dean, we're coming up on a 60 minutes, which I'd like to try and keep things to. It's been absolutely brilliant. Hilariously, for people who are still listening, we had pretty much this exact conversation in our get to know each other chat.
We did.
So I hope we've done it as well as we did it without pressing record.
I'm sure we have.
Exactly. Where can people connect with you or find more out about you, Dean?
Obviously, I'm on social media as Dean Coulson. You'll be able to find me on there. My website, theleanwarrior.com. Got a blog called deancoulson.co.uk. So they're my main areas that you can connect with me.
Brilliant. And I look forward to seeing you more involved with Team Superdad and the Hero Academy for sure.
Yeah,
we're going to, in the firewalking, there's always the day kind of starts with board breaking and stuff. So have you ever done a firewalk?
No, I haven't actually. No.
There we go.
Yeah,
we're in. We'll get you involved. Absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to say goodbye to everyone. Hold tight and I'll catch you on the other side. Okay. Guys, thanks for listening. I'll wrap this up after the credits. See you on the other side.
Yes, thanks.